on, Soda Pop, let's go.
Next item is an opportunity for public comment.
This is the time when anyone can speak on an issue that is not already on the agenda. I'd like you to keep your comments to around 5 minutes if possible. Is there anyone who would like to speak? If you'd come to the podium, identify yourself, your name and your address for just part of the record. You might have to pull the microphone down a little bit. Thank you.
I'm Connie Mogan, and I live at 916 South Grandview Avenue. It's on the east side. I want to ask about when the districts get changed for voting and stuff, why it is we don't get notified.
Okay.
Has anybody got an answer for that?
I would suggest Mr. Litz is the one to answer that question.
I don't think the auditor's here. Bob, did you hear her question?
I did.
Can you come up and give an answer? Or otherwise, this is public comment, and we can address these issues later if need to be.
I believe the question was when districts get changed, why is not the public notified? And I think what she's referring to is when the different types of elections come around. Is that correct? As opposed to...
No, I was changed from District 14 to District 25 without any notification.
Well, I think that, I'm going to go back to what Mr. Barth had talked about here last week, and that would be the wrong ballots, because is that what you were talking about? Did you get a wrong ballot? Or?
No, I didn't get notified, and through other connections I found out about it, so I know which candidates to study up on to vote.
Well,
I didn't get any notification.
Then at this
Auditor,
point
let's just stick to her question specifically.
Without being able to investigate what she's asking about, I really don't have a good answer for you. So I would invite you to come down to the auditor's office or go down there and see Heather, and she will.
You don't know what the policy is on that? Is that a county policy or is that a state policy to not notify?
Well, I guess I'm a little confused about exactly what you're talking about, because you said districts, which are legislative districts, so it could be the city districts. So if you would like to come down to our office, we'd be glad to research it and tell you what we know about it. But right now, I'm not prepared to answer your question adequately.
I think it should have been answered here, but...
Thank you, Connie. Is there anyone else who has a public comment for this morning? All right. Seeing... excuse me, I have another one. You have to identify yourself and your address, please. You'll pull the microphone down too, please. Pull the microphone down a little bit, please. Thank you. Yes.
Lori Stacy, 120 South Lindale Avenue, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And I am the state chairman of the Constitution Party of South Dakota and two-time statewide candidate for Secretary of State of South Dakota. I'm here to discuss, and it may take more than 5 minutes, but I'll try and read fast, some of the observations and comments that were made by Commissioner Jeff Barth after his canvass and audit of the Minnehaha County election process. It is my opinion, first of all, I agree with him that he referred to and used the words illegitimate election. I would totally agree with that. And I've brought some observations, preliminary observations, that I have made going over various reports that reported throughout the state and throughout Minnehaha County that occurred on November 4th. First of all, there were state and federal election laws that were broken, not only relating to Minnehaha County, but also Pennington County and Shannon County. The entire statewide election really is in question, and I will cite some of the reasons why I say that. In violation and willful ignorance by Secretary of State Jason Gant and Attorney General Marty Jackley, 2 additional statewide candidates officially received the nomination of the Constitution Party of South Dakota. The 2 elected officials refused to obey State Statute 12-6-9, which clearly states that unopposed candidates of a state political party in South Dakota are not allowed on the primary ballot because they are automatically considered the nominees if they ran unopposed. All of the petition requirements for running for federal office and governor refer only to being able to get on the primary election ballot. Therefore, when the deadline to turn in those petitions to get on the primary ballot for U.S. House and governor passed, and no other CP candidate had opposed them, I, as the state chairman, in accordance with my mandatory duty as such, sent a certification letter to Jason Grant, officially certifying Charles Hahn of Watertown for U.S. House and Curtis Strong of Rapid City for governor as our official unopposed nominees. Instead of putting them immediately on the general election ballot, both of these state officials absolutely refused to obey state law. Number two, there was widespread voter suppression, intimidation reported at numerous precincts throughout the state. Reports of police, sheriff's personnel, and/or their patrol cars parked at precincts in a very visible way, such as parked in the first row of precincts parking lots so they could be seen clearly by voters that were driving up to the polls. This did not just occur in Shannon County. Patrol cars were also observed at polling places in Sioux Falls. Federal law states, any officer, whether civil or military, who, quote, orders, brings, keeps, or has the authority under his authority or control any troops or armed men at any place where a general or special election is held, unless such force is necessary to repel armed enemies of the United States, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 5 years or both, and be disqualified from holding any office or honor, profit, or trust under the United States. Number three, national and local media called winners in the U.S. Senate and governor races while some polls were still open within the state. This is a violation of both state and federal law. South Dakota State Statute 12-20-17, returns not disclosed until all polls in state closed. No public disclosure of the returns of state and federal elections in any primary or general election is permitted until each precinct polling place in the state is closed. This provision applies to each precinct polling place within the state. Number four, Shannon County, voter suppression, inaccurate interpretation of federal law in order to not count late cast ballots, complete neglect of proper chain of custody procedures for the security of ballots. Why was an elections official allowed to retain ballots at their home, thereby breaking all acceptable chain of custody procedures for the security of those ballots? Were these absentee or early voting ballots that had already been cast? Were they blank, unsecured ballots that could be compromised and used for ballot stuffing purposes? How long were these ballots kept in said official's private home without supervision by any other parties? Hours, days, weeks? How many other counties use the same procedure? What is the probability of such a fiasco innocently happening in the first place? Attorney General was quoted in media reports regarding the ballots that had to be cast after normal poll hours due to suspicious incompetence could only be counted upon a judge ordering them to be counted according to federal law. Well, this is not what the federal law says and appears to not be a reasonable interpretation of said law. According to federal law, pertaining to the casting of ballots under normal state polling hours have closed, the ballots are, yes, to be set aside, and then they are to be treated completely separately, but in the same manner as any other provisional ballots cast, i.e. verification of eligibility to vote, verification of eligibility to cast their vote at the proper precinct, etc. This is according to Title 42 U.S. Code Section 15482. Number 5, voter suppression in Sioux Falls. In my own precinct here in Sioux Falls, this was the third different polling place in the last 3 significant elections. Notice must be sent by law to all registered voters affected by a change in their polling place. The last 2 elections, my own address received only 1 notice each time addressed to a family member that is registered to vote, and only a few days prior to the election, which is the latest possible time for notice under the law. However, I have yet to receive a notice of either change in either of the last 2 elections, as I never received one. Apparently, many other voters in Sioux Falls did not receive one either, judging by the reports that were widely reported of voters running around Sioux Falls going to the wrong precincts. Well, no wonder. They must not have gotten a notice either. It is not even possible to know how many voters gave up because they did not have much time to go to the correct precinct after possibly waiting in line at the first one. Number 6, recreating ballots in Minnehaha County. According to state statute, disputed ballots are to be handled in the following manner. State Statute 12-20-5. Count of votes for candidates, scrutiny of ballots by precinct deputies, decisions on disputed ballots. The votes for the several candidates shall be counted in the order in which the candidates occur upon the ballots. At least 2 precinct deputies of opposite political parties shall scrutinize each ballot with the precinct superintendent acting to break any tie vote of the 2 precinct deputies ruling on a ballot. As the vote is announced, 2 precinct deputies shall make the mark required on the tally sheets. The use of the term tally sheets clearly means that disputed ballot were to be hand counted. It does not mean that any ballot was to be recreated so they could then be fed through the scanner. The recreated, i.e. forging, fabricating, or tampering of ballots is preposterous. How many other counties in South Dakota followed this outrageous procedure on election night as if it was standard practice? I think we, the voters, want that question answered right away. It is a violation of federal law for a person, including an election official, who in any election for federal office knowingly and willfully deprives, defrauds, or attempts to deprive or defraud the residents of a state of a fair and impartially conducted election process by the procurement, casting, or tabulation of ballots that are known by the person to be material false, fictitious, or fraudulent under the laws of the state in which the election is held. Now, on this matter, when the Minnehaha count for hours and hours, we weren't getting any numbers being reported. As the state chair of the Constitution Party, I did come down here at 2:30 a.m. that morning to find out what in the world is going on. Bob Litz had just portrayed on the news and in person that the voters really messed up the ballots. He quoted such things as macaroni and cheese on them, scribbling all over the ballots. That just wasn't what I ended up seeing that night when I was allowed to come in and take a look at what the process was for processing these ballots. The clear intent of the ones I saw of the voter was definitely there. Voters did not mess up the ballot so bad because there was a, quote, full moon. Many of the ballots had a peculiar dot on them, a perfect dot centered perfectly in the middle of one of the ovals under a candidate's name. Now, the problem with assuming that that was made by voters just defies all logic, especially when the particular ballot that I saw with this perfect dot in the perfect center of an oval was definitely made by a different type of ink. The voter used a black felt pen that most voters around the state had found at the polling place to vote with. Yet this perfect dot was obviously not a blank ink pen mark and looked a lot more like a computer-generated anomaly. So the only logical conclusion one could come with, given the unusual activities that night, the appearance of a dot on many ballots in a perfect position, etc., and the fact that another poll worker there that night said that a lot of the ballots had this peculiar dot on them. I just think there are way too many problems, too many laws that were broken that night, and I think that at the very minimum, a new election should be held in Minnehaha County based on my observations, Commissioner Jeff Barth's recommendations, and thousands of people around South Dakota that are finding statistical anomalies in the final reported vote counts, and we're just not buying it, folks. These numbers are way out of whack from polls, from historical data, etc. And so I am asking you to please reconsider and look at our final vote counts. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Are there any other public comments? Bruce? Just identify yourself again and your address, please. Thank you.
Bruce Danielson of Sioux Falls. The other day I was here for the official canvass, and I appreciate what Laura Stacy's just been talking about, because I was one of those people that was working here for most of the election day. I spent about 23 hours hanging around the courthouse doing different things, and I enjoy being part of that process. The reason that I got involved in the process on election day is because I've never trusted the machines. Just flat out. I came up in the process of voting and helping in polling places back long before we had machines to be involved, and we had, as we used to call it, the blue hair set that used to sit there until 2 o'clock in the morning if necessary, making sure the voter intent was as correct as possible. And then the official canvass was brought into the process to make sure that they hadn't made any statistical mistakes or counting mistakes. But we're past those days, and we now have machines that are part of the process. In the past, we've had 4 machines that were tabulating. The 4 machines were able to keep going and moving the information through the process very smoothly with the resolutions board. I've now been on the resolutions board several times, and I really enjoy this part of the process. And when Bob asked me to be part of it at about midnight the other night, I was very happy to take part in it, because I want to make sure that the concerns Lori has and the rest of the people have, and to also solve my irritations with the system, are handled. And I gave out a printout to each of you the other day, and I hope you've had a chance to look at it, and I've made a few others if anybody here wants a copy of it. But it's my observations from having been involved in elections for the last 48 years. And what I saw the other night, I was reasonably proud of what had happened the other night. It bothered me that it took so long to get it, and I understand why the machines. I'm involved in computer technology. I understand why those machines spit out the ballots. There were about 600 that got spit out directly that the resolutions boards had to take care of. And the mysterious dots, we began to see, at least we were able to start figuring out what had happened with those mysterious dots. And they weren't all in the same slots. They weren't all in any way that you could say anything other than, having been in the voting booth as many years as I've been in voting booths, you set your pencil down in the past going, okay, do I want Cindy, or do I want Jeff, or do I want Dick, or do I, you set it down and you go, oh, that's right, I wanted this one, then I want this one. And so the pens we were using, they left a mark, just a little tiny dot. And having gone through all the ballots that I went through as my part of the resolution board, we never had a disagreement. When we saw there was definite voter intent to say that they wanted Lori Stacy versus Chantel Krebs. There wasn't any dissension if they wanted Jeff instead of Cindy. There was never any of that in any of the boards, and I looked over the shoulders. In fact, I helped some newbies the first time that either of them had been on the board. I stood there with them for probably the first half hour to hour, just watching them, helping them, through that part of the process so they could see what's going on. I've had the ability in the years past with the older machines, when I was standing there, because of the work I do, I could see anomalies in the ballots, that there were problems with certain types of ballots, and always brought it to the attention of Rich or whoever was running the equipment to say, I think about 5 ballots back there was a problem, and they would pull it up and we would work with it. And it would go to the resolutions board to be satisfied. I love the process. I hope to be involved in helping solve this issue that we've got. Overall, one of the few things that I have noticed that I would like to put on the record is that I don't believe in voting centers. I don't believe by having 16 or 20 voting centers versus the 71 voting locations is advantageous, especially in an urban area like Sioux Falls, where people are used to walking to vote. The idea that somebody went and voted at the city election, and they go back to that same church or whatever location it was, and there's nobody there to take their ballot, and so they start driving around town trying to figure out where they're supposed to vote. I think that's absolutely wrong. I want the 71 locations, or whatever is deemed practical, to make sure the process is correct. I've had one concern from the time the contracts were let for the new tabulators. I was disappointed that the new tabulators were brought in before this election, without any chance to be able to test the equipment in a small batch like a school board election. That would have, to me, would have been a better solution, but the contract was let, the machines were here. I know the staff downstairs, and I've worked with them enough elections to know that they did the best job that they could do under the circumstances. And you can't think of all of these reasons why a ballot would be marked wrong. There were minor training issues. There always are. I didn't see anything in my watching the ballots go through these new machines that made me scared that the vote was off. The work I do, I watch thousands of lines of code go in front of my face, and I can see anomalies. Something doesn't look right, and you go back and you try and find what didn't look right. And I watched those machines. And that's what I did for a big chunk of the night before I was asked to be on the resolution board. We had people that had to go to work because it was an all-night process. I was hoping it wouldn't be. I thought Bob had a good plan doing the absentees first, because in normal years, you want to get those out of the way right away because there's usually so many problems. Well, when you have ballots that are folded multiple times, and you see some of these ballots where people have actually put 5 creases in it to get it into some kind of an envelope, or they're upset, or whatever their reasons are. I saw the food stains, the coffee spills. One year we actually had some kind of sticky substance on the ballots. So you have to take those ballots and recreate them to make them work. We try very hard, Lori, to make sure that those ballots are correct. We have some issues with state law that need to be addressed and corrected in a lot of different ways. So one of the things I would just like to ask is when we get into this part as a commission and make suggestions for the way we vote and the way we handle things in South Dakota, that I would like to be able to come back and talk about it and help the process. So,
Thank you, Bruce, for your comments.
you bet. If you had any questions at all about any of the information I've given you, please feel free to call me.
Okay, thanks, Bruce.
Thank you.
Yep. Is there anyone else that would like to talk during public? Any old business?
We've been talking about cooperation with the city, and I guess I'm glad to see the chairman of the Sioux Falls City Council here to observe our proceedings, and welcome him.
Yeah. We have two old business items. One would be to congratulate Commissioner Peckus on his upcoming judgeship. He will be staying with us probably through the end of this year, and in January we will be appointing a new, January, February, whenever we get around to it, appointing a new commissioner to his seat. I would like to maybe consider putting it on the agenda for next week for discussion as to...
I won't be here next week because I'm stuck in trial, but I don't have a lot to say.
But you won't have a lot to say
have a
anyway.
lot to say.
So,
I don't count.
I think if it's okay with the other commissioners, we could put that on for discussion for next week on how we want to move forward with selecting a new commissioner. This will be, no? I'm looking at Ken for direction.
I'm just looking at some scheduling issues and wondering if perhaps that discussion would be better served for the following week. We're running on kind of
Okay.
a short week with my schedule and
Okay.
everything. We're
Okay.
just-
What's the date of the following week? It's before Thanksgiving, isn't it?
Yeah.
and that could be-
23rd.
Okay. So maybe we put that on the 23rd then? Okay. We'll put that for discussion on replacement.
I would suggest that we...
25th, excuse me.
I would suggest that we ask Commissioner Benga if he has any comments to write them down so that we can
Right.
consider them at that time.
I tried to catch him last night and I did not catch him, so. Ken?
Well, again, one of the reasons too, I'm suggesting that, I know, as you know, Commissioner Benega will be out for a little while, and there may be an opportunity once he's able to, and we've done that in the past, is to have them participate by a teleconference, and we'd like to make that arrangement. And I'm just not sure we can accomplish that by the 18th, and that's
Okay.
why I would suggest the 25th in order to allow that to happen.
Okay.
Good idea.
Yep.
Isn't there a new state law, Ken, that also requires us to make sure that media can get access? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, we have to give notice to where they can come and participate, and quite frankly, the last time we did it, the notice that we gave is come and participate here, because that's where, that's where his face will be, so.
Yeah. And my last old business would be just the election review. We've had some discussion. Friday, we had the canvassing, and it kind of happened late in Friday, so it did not make the agenda for today. I would like to bring that forward. Do we want to go forward with next week? Put that on next week's agenda to have discussion on how we would like to review the election proceedings and see if there's anything we can do about that. So that will be on next week's agenda, election board review discussion. So, any other old business? Seeing none, I would like...
I'll make a motion for personnel and legal briefing.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn into personnel and legal briefings. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Meeting adjourned.
Come on, Soda Pop, let's go. Come on, let's go. Come on.